The Knicks stay alive in Game 5. What has happened to the Pittsburgh Steelers? And we're joined by the incredible Kim Jones. It's all right now on Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey there, welcome in. It is another edition, episode 11 of Gordon Damer on Sports. Before we dive in, do me a favor, subscribe, like the episode, share the episode with friends, family, with total strangers. I am not picky. Any growth in my eyes is good growth, but please hit a couple of buttons. It does really help out. Look, we're going to get into everything with the Knicks and their Game 5 win and the feeling of where the heck has that been this entire playoff series. We're going to be joined by Kim Jones to talk things over. But first, I've got something that's been rattling around in my head. And it's something I think we all kind of know, but when you really get down to the nitty gritty of it and you realize what's going on, it's kind of mind-boggling. Have you ever watched a time travel movie like Planet of the Apes, Back to the Future, Idiocracy, whatever your choice? But whatever the genre, there's always that moment where the character looks around and says, wait a second, something's off. This place kind of looks familiar, but it's not the same. That to me, that it feels like we have an NFL version of that right now, and it is involving the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now look, the Steelers used to be different. This was the franchise. They were the first team of the decade, right? The Steel Curtain, Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Lynn Swann, Franco Harris. This is a team, this is an organization that's had three head coaches in 50 years? That's not just stability. That is what a culture is, right? That's standards. That's the Rooney way. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. That's the lineage. That's the expectation. But now things have been kind of slipping for a little while. Now it seems like their brand is much more, well, we never have a losing season, which is good for some organizations, but this is the Steelers. This is the 6-time Super Bowl champion Steelers. And as if that was not bad enough, now they're waiting around to see if Aaron Rodgers still feels like playing football. Now, this alternate universe didn't happen overnight. Things generally don't fall apart all at once. They erode, right? Slowly over time. And by the time you realize what's broken, it's probably been broken for a while. And the Steelers, it feels like it's been broken for a little while. Haven't won a playoff game since 2016. That's almost a full decade of irrelevance in the most important parts of the year. And as if that was not bad enough, now their plan is Aaron Rodgers. And again, this is their plan A. This was their actual plan going into the offseason. It's not like it was unexpected. It's not an emergency move after an injury or it's a draft pick didn't work out. This was their plan all along, to just sit and wait, I guess, cross your fingers and hope that Aaron Rodgers wants to be the Steelers quarterback this year. So it's not a surprise that he's not at OTAs. It's not a surprise they don't know when or if he'll show up. And let me be clear, I don't blame Rodgers in this situation. He's being exactly who he's always been. He's vague. He's non-committal. He's all about his process, his terms, his pace. We've seen this for a while now. He did it in Green Bay. He did it with the Jets. And now he's doing it again. So I do not blame Aaron Rodgers. I blame the Steelers because they're the ones allowing it. And it would be one thing if this was some organization that didn't know right from wrong and couldn't figure things out with two hands and a map. This isn't the Panthers. This isn't the Dolphins. This isn't some desperate team scrambling for attention or a team with a new owner who's just looking to make a splashy move and sign a future Hall of Famer. This is the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least they used to be. This is an organization that has tasted the ultimate success, Hall of Famers, history, stability. And now they're the team sitting, groveling almost, and waiting to hear from Aaron. So to me, this isn't just like bad management. This is an identity crisis. This is what happens when that erosion kind of goes unchecked. They used to have a standard, and now they're waiting for Aaron Rodgers to kind of text them back to see if he feels like playing this year. It's rare for former players to criticize other players, but you see it with the Steelers. Cam Hayward came out about a month ago, and you have Terry Bradshaw. Now look, talent wins out in these situations. So if Aaron Rodgers were MVP Aaron Rodgers, maybe he could dictate terms like this. Or at least I would understand then a team waiting around, hanging on every word, waiting for a decision from the MVP future Hall of Famer. But this guy is not that guy. So to see the Steelers groveling in this situation like this, it's kind of mind-boggling, because what's the ceiling for this Steelers team if and when Rodgers decides to play? And let's say he even stays healthy for a year and has a better year than he did last year with the Jets. It kind of feels like the ceiling is 9-8, going to the playoffs and losing in the wild card round. So look, maybe Rodgers does show up. Maybe he plays. Maybe he's decent. Maybe the Steelers make a playoff push. But that is wildly optimistic. And what does it really say about what the Steelers have become? This is about a franchise that used to kind of be one of the tone setters, one of the premier franchises in the NFL, and now they're sitting around and waiting to see if a guy decides to play for them. That's not just a bad plan. That's kind of a betrayal of everything a great organization should stand for. And the Steelers used to stand for those kind of things. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. They might look at this as some calculated gamble. To me, it's absolute desperation. The Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is the Pittsburgh Steelers, once the most stable and respected brand in football. They're now crossing their fingers and hoping the quarterback will want to play for them. I can make two predictions fairly confidently. After this upcoming season, Aaron Rodgers will not still be in Pittsburgh. And I'm guessing if this season goes like I think it will, he might not be the only one changing teams. All right, now we're joined by an absolute media superstar who has excelled in everything she has ever done. Yankee Clubhouse, NFL Network, show host, radio host. She's so good, I'm surprised she even still talks to me. She is the lovely and talented Kim Jones. Kim, thank you for doing this.
I don't know about all of that, but you know what? These days, Jordan, I'll take it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's funny that we got together to do this, because what made me think of it, well, I'm always looking for guests now to fill this podcast and people who are interesting with things to say. And I was scrolling on TikTok. I don't think you're on TikTok, but unbeknownst to you, you are on TikTok. I came across like a random thing on my scrolling feed, and it was footage.
Told me it wasn't a disaster.
No, it was you in the clubhouse with Mike Mussina asking a question and Mussina giving a very thoughtful answer. I'm like, look at this. Kim has no idea the media reach that she still has today. So that's just to maybe boost the ego a little bit.
You just made my day. Thank you.
All right. So you have we'll get into a lot of different things with the Yankees and all that stuff, but I know you at heart, you're a football gal. You are NFL through and through. So you cover the Giants for a bunch of years. You know that organization very well. You're also a Penn State gal. I'd have to assume the Abdul Carter pick at number 3 was right up your alley.
Can I make a prediction?
Yeah.
That if I'm right, you'll come back to me when it happens?
Yeah.
Okay. Abdul Carter, in his first NFL game, will get a flag, will draw a holding flag, something that the Big Ten refs, who we could do a dissertation on, we're not going to, never afforded him. He never got a call, and the guy never lost his poise. And I thought that was interesting. Listen, these guys are all, years and years and years younger than you and I. And I'm an emotional person. I can't say that, that if I could somehow transport myself into that situation, that I wouldn't have gone nuts. The guy, now you might, someone could look back and say, oh, we had a holding call against Kent State in this game. But I'm talking about it in the heat of the moment. My boyfriend and I went to the Ohio State game this year. We were up a tier or two. And I'm not complaining. The person who got us tickets is a saint and I love her. But we could see the holding from the stands. And he never got a call. He is incredible. I hope at some point I meet him. I'm not in that world anymore, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on what you're looking at. But someday I would like to at least say to him, Penn Stater to Penn Stater, he was unbelievably constrained. well, he wasn't constrained. He was, he constrained himself, I should say, from not going nuts over all of these little jackrabbits nipping at his heels, and he could never get a holding call. It was amazing. So that is one thing, as Giants fans look to the NFL season, I actually think that's going to be very interesting to see, because I don't look at NFL refs the same way as I look at Big Ten refs for many, 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 many reasons.
Well, I'll be looking on FanDuel as we get closer to the season, see if I can put a couple of shekels on that. Well, look, you covered the Giants for many years. Where do you see this organization at right now?
Yeah, you know what? Obviously, I anticipated, us talking at least some part Giants. Here's what I would say. They got what I consider a reprieve. I obviously am not going to talk to ownership of any team. What the heck do I know compared to them? But to me, they got a reprieve in both coming back for this season. I don't think that's, breaking news.
No.
Either, by the way. I think that there would be probably maybe half the teams in the league, maybe more. Maybe you would say, hey, Kim, but it's probably more that would have departed, that would have had either both or two, departing. I don't know if we're going to get into it. I will say this. If you want to talk more about it, we can talk whatever. It's your podcast. The Saquon stuff last summer was an absolute disgrace for a player who did not deserve that at any level, at any time in his life. And I proudly say, and I don't keep in touch with him these days. I don't bug people. I don't have a reason to talk to him. We're not BFFs. But he handled himself with such class through so many different New York Giants issues, off-season issues, the not going to trade him, then they clearly wanted to unload him. I think that Saquon was truly one of the best parts of the Giants in his time there, if not at times the best part. And now they do get a fresh start. John Mara afforded them that. You could go both ways, I'm sure. And I'm not sure, I wouldn't presume to tell you what an owner was thinking, but they better make the most of it, I think. I know I'm a little bit all over the place here and giving you a ton to digest, and maybe the listeners tons to digest. But the Giants, to me, I don't know what's quote unquote acceptable this year, but I wouldn't want to be a Giants team this season with that leadership towing the line saying, oh, we'll get another year again. I wouldn't want to be that person.
And, sometimes it's tough to know what ownership is thinking because we don't have access to them as fans like me. But you saw John Mara on that Hard Knocks and what he said. And to think that it played out in his worst case scenario, the Giants were terrible again. The Eagles were great again. And Saquon was a major, he took them to that next level and was as great as we all kind of envisioned he could be in the right situation. It's kind of surprising to me. And I just wonder, you might not know John Mara well, but you've had conversations with him. At what point does that patience kind of wear off? I'm surprised it hasn't already.
Especially with a player who is just, you could say you're biased. I'm a Penn Stater. I knew him before the media did because James Franklin, generally speaking with those players, gives me a little time with them. That did not happen with Abdul Carter, by the way, just because I haven't been around. I assume that's why. But I didn't ask. With Saquon, I asked, and I did a story on him before he, as he came into the league. But I remember last August, John Mara met with us. It was sort of off campus. It was in like Hackensack, New Jersey, because he was going to be there for, something with their stuff. And at least it sounded to me like he thought that had to be a must-win year. And it was anything but. Plus, your best player just went off and, conceivably could have been the league MVP. It's not in
the conversation. Sure.
It's easy to say that. And a lot of people, when I'd talk to just friends and stuff, they would, tell me why he won't be and everything. And I get it. And it's, and stuff, but he certainly had a case. And if you coupled it with the person that he was able to be, even after going to the Eagles, which, seems to be working out pretty well for him, by the way. You look at him and you say, maybe this next part of his journey that now already includes a Super Bowl is going to be pretty darn special.
It is. It's fascinating. And when the conversation comes up about the Giants, it seems like obviously there's a lot of focus on the head coach. It's a coaching league and Brian Dable is certainly on the hot seat. I always go back to the GM with just some of the move. He walks in the first year with 2 top 10 picks. Hard to say either of them has been a home run. You look at where the roster is going into year 4. I think the quarterback situation is better than it was, but I think that's more of an indictment of where it was going into last year and where it's been. So I wonder just how much more patience. And I think that really the patience is stemmed not from what this current regime is doing, but what the previous regimes. I think John Mara feels bad that he had to make as many changes as quickly as possible. But I don't think that anybody's saying we should have given Joe Judge more time back then, or Pat Shermer or Gettleman or any of those. So I just wonder where the patience, for a year where it seems like this is make or break, it doesn't seem to be in a great position going into the year.
Well, and if Evan Neal's a high price guard, I mean, where have you left yourself, in that draft? I mean, squandering draft picks, it seems to me, is almost inexcusable. Now, you can't get into, a prospect's, mind and know everything about him as much as they try.
They try
through interviews and everything else. But my goodness, the Evan Neal pick to me is as damaging as anything that I've seen, from this organization. And, now, oh, well, maybe he'll be an all pro guard. Well, okay, but you'd be paying him a lot less, and you should have paid him a lot less if that was your plan. They could have gotten him somewhere else, or a player of his magnitude, or certainly better at that pick. And that pick to me right now is what Dable and Shane represent for the Giants. And then you put beside that the Saquon issue, where, I was there in the locker room that day, Gordon, when I'm not saying begged in the word, really in the word, but he pleaded, that's a better word. He pleaded for the Giants, give it to me straight. Think about that. Think about that with the player we're talking about. Not a big boisterous guy, not a guy who shirks at, any responsibility on the field or in the locker room. Very important. And, the Giants have not painted themselves in glory over these years. And at some point, it's got to turn around. I have to believe that. Whether John Mara thought that he was too quick with the others, he didn't want to be an owner, changing regimes, every 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it's been. I can't imagine anything other than playoffs is acceptable this year. I just can't believe it.
You always seem to have such a great relationship with individual players. You mentioned Saquon. I think back to when Odell Beckham was with the Giants. You have a different relationship with players than it seems like others do. What goes into that? Is that just the beauty of Kim Jones? How are you able to develop those relationships?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll talk to you later, Gordon. The podcast is over.
But it is, I mean, look, when Odell was here, the way he was perceived and portrayed almost en masse was completely different than the person I saw when he would talk to you.
Yeah. Well, and that's about trust. I always thought as a reporter, and this goes back to my days, at Penn State, even as a young, very young reporter back then, not young anymore. I always thought if a player trusts you, you can get to tell his story better. I remember talking to Micah Parsons, the Cowboys, after they beat the Giants one day. I can't remember which season, but Micah, and I didn't know Micah really well, but I knew him enough to have a connection. Well, James Franklin obviously was the connection there, and even he, was pretty open in a post game interview I did with him. But when you talk about the players I was around daily, all the time, we'll take Saquon out of it. We've discussed Saquon, and everyone understands that situation. But with Odell, he trusted me, and that went a long way. And I'm not going to compare myself to other reporters. I don't think that's fair. I think we all have to find our own way. Sometimes it works, and it worked sometimes really well for me, with the relationships with Saquon, with Odell, and others. Sterling Shepard, Shep got along with everyone in the locker room, but he was a good guy too, for me to, bounce things off of. Heck, I met Strahan back in the day. I mean, I go back to covering those teams, Strahan, Lomas Brown, who's, just an unbelievable player in person. So when players trust you, they're going to trust you with their thoughts. They're going to trust you with conveying their messages. Not every time, but a lot of times I felt like I had kind of earned what they were giving me. And those were the most satisfying times of my career, whether it was something big or small, to kind of have that for yourself, or at least have the interpretation of what the player was saying, because those can be very different things. Not everyone tries to get, I've heard players in locker rooms, and I'm not talking about just the current one. I already said, I go way back, with Strahan and the Lomas Brown days, and Dan Campbell, who is fantastic, as we all now know. But, they're not always treated that well, but some of them earn that. Some of them earn that. But I always wanted the people I covered to believe that I would represent what I saw, but also what they thought. And I think that helped me a great deal.
We're, of course, talking with the lovely and talented Kim Jones about everything sports, the NFL, her career at NFL Network. Are there storylines that you're looking forward to in this NFL season that I know it's like 100 days away still, but are you still keeping an eye on certain things? And what are those things?
Well, I'll tell you, the Bills interest me a great deal. They've been on the doorstep. They've had some, you could say unlucky matchups, but a lot of people have really unlucky matchups when they play the Bills too, and it's just getting over that hump. I'm glad that regime is generally still there. I think that they're good coaches. Some of my fondest days when I look back were about covering the Bills, because when the Jets and Giants went through those droughts of not, being overly.
You're saying it like it's past tense.
Well, yeah. I'm past tense now.
Yeah, well, we all are, Kim. We all are.
No, but when I would go to Buffalo, I was always so impressed by their organization, the way the players interacted with the media. And you might say, yeah, but that's Buffalo. This is New York and everything. But I think you can still treat people decently. Now if they unearn that, you can also walk away. I can't tell you off the top of my head who, but I'm sure there were a couple players over the years that I just kind of stayed clear from, because it didn't seem like a welcoming situation. And frankly, I was lucky enough I had other players I could talk to. But Josh Allen, to me, is one of, I hope I get to tell him this one day. I did tell his parents this at the last NFL game I did in Buffalo, which would have been 2002, about how much I appreciated their son, and how much he helped me when he didn't always have to. And as someone who likes to tie up loose ends, in a way, and I've tied up some, I haven't tied up others probably, but the ones that I could, and his family was there that day, so I got to say hello to them, and it just felt like a good time. Josh Allen helped me as much as I think a quarterback could, and not by giving away trade secrets, not by telling me the game plan. I probably wouldn't be able to understand it anyway with all of the numbers
jargon, right?
Talk about and everything else, but I really still have a special place in my heart for Buffalo, for Kim Pegula, who was a very good friend of mine. And that's an unfortunate situation. The Pegulas, of course, still own the team. But, Kim had that event that changed the course of her life, which is something that still tears at my soul. She was a very good friend to me. But, life goes on. Life goes on, whether it's football, whether it's something much more important than football. That's one thing that this time off, where I haven't gotten sniffs, I'll admit that. A couple sniffs for jobs. I did leave my last job, so that was my choice, and I don't regret that. But when I do kind of chronicle my career as I lay in bed at night, or as I think, in a podcast like this one, or just in the middle of the day, something pops up. I'm happy. I'm happy about what I did. Would I like it to continue? Heck yes. Heck yes. I feel great. I feel like there's more to give, but I'm also, I'll leave it there. But I will say that I'm not like pie in the sky that something is going to marvelously appear. I get that. I really do. And maybe it is someone else's turn. Well, and it's been someone else's turn for a little while now. And I respect that. I'll say this.
Mhm.
I gave the job, whichever job it was, everything I had in every, and you might say like, well, you never had kids, you never got married. And I understand that. And I knew during it, I was giving up some of those opportunities. For me, that was okay. For me, that was okay. I have a wonderful boyfriend now. We'll see what the future holds job wise. But yeah, like it's just cool to talk to you, Gordon. It's cool to be on this. And it's just, there's a lot that I look back on and smile about. And that I will tell you makes me happy.
Well, I will tell you, when I mentioned to people that I'm having you on, your name still resonates with people. So it's crazy to me that you can't get an opportunity to do whatever it is you want to do, because I'll tell you, I don't throw that word around superstar very often. And it's not just something that I'm saying here to your face. I tell that to people all the time. And I've never had anybody disagree with it. I mean, hosting shows, writing, football, base. I mean, and it's never about you.
Baseball. Oh yes.
It's never, and in this day and age, people have to make it
without me.
Right. All about them. You do it in a way that it's enjoyable, it's entertaining, it's passionate, it's opinionated, it's everything that you would want in whatever medium you are. So, at the end of the day, all these jobs, it's just based on somebody's opinion, unfortunately, right? Like it's kind of subjective, but I don't think it's subjective to say you nail it at everything you do. So I hope that whatever it is you want to do, you get a chance to do.
I appreciate that. That's really cool of you. Just FYI, since we're talking here, Zoom to Zoom, if anyone ever reaches out to you.
Absolutely.
First of all, my contact information is pretty easy to find. After all these years, I'm in those NFL black books that give the beat writers' names and addresses and stuff, and phone numbers, obviously. So if anyone wants to reach out, I'm willing to listen. But it's been a fun ride. It really has. And I thank you. I think you've been a great friend over the years. I think we have a lot in common in some ways.
Absolutely.
And you made my day by asking.
Well, look, back in 2018, I think it was November of 2018.
Oh boy.
You're going to, I think it was Washington camp.
Yep.
And your life changed forever that day. Can you, whatever you feel comfortable telling and detailing, I know you have in the past. Tell us about that day.
I was at the Redskins. They were rightly called the Redskins. Yep. I was at the Redskins prepping for a Redskins home game, I believe. And as I was sitting down before doing my hit for NFL Network, my 45 seconds, 1 minute hit, whatever it was, and then probably getting in the car and driving home, I said to my field producer, I don't feel right. And she said, oh, I was literally like next up on the air, I believe, or second next on the air. And all of a sudden I just collapsed. And to get to the end of the story first and then fill in a couple details, I had an aortic dissection. It is not common. It is not completely not common. Anyone who watched Three's Company back in the day, John Ritter died of one. He didn't get the luck that I had. And I used to love Three's Company, watching him,
of course,
and everything on TV back then. But I remember being in the ambulance and they were saying, Kim, stay with us, stay with us. Now, I've never been in an ambulance before that or after that. So I don't know if they tell everyone, stay with me. Don't know that. A really cool part of the story that my mom, who's now deceased, loved was that I got to the hospital and the cardiologist on duty was Dr. Linda Bogar. But we got there late because we'd get through traffic and everything else in that area. And she later told me and my parents that she could have done my surgery, the aortic dissection, to mend it. But she thought Dr. Alan Spear and Dr. Liam Ryan together would be better for my operation. So she said as long as she could keep me stable the whole night, they would do it in the morning. My mom loves that part of the story because she was so selfless. She was so selfless in that moment. And I hope Inova continues to know how much, I really appreciate them. They gave me world-class care. I was actually, once I got to a room, I was actually in the room that Dick Cheney had been in after he had some cardiac event or whatever it was. I mean, who knew? That seems like way back, but it was way back. But I probably shouldn't even be here now. And I really thank you for having me on because I don't know that I look back as much as I should sometimes. I mean, some people spend their lives looking back, and that's not ideal either, I don't think. But to look back with gratitude, to look back and say you were a little girl with a little notebook and you got to cover some pretty cool people, some pretty cool coaches, and I don't think that's a bad deal anymore. I really don't. If this is it for me in this profession, for whatever reasons, people don't like me anymore, they don't want to hear from me anymore, whatever the case is, I can accept that first and foremost because I'm still alive.
So how's that changed your perspective? Has it had to, right? Change your perspective on life, on everyday things. Does that wear off? Do you still have that perspective today?
I think I do. I'm more emotional now. Now that could be for any number of reasons, but I do think that, what I would never speak for other people who've gone through something that can be life-threatening, to say the least. For me, I think when I got back to work, I wanted to hit the ground running though. I mean, I really do love the jobs I've had. And the last one I had on a permanent level would be NFL Network, except for, a short time at Newsday, which I don't count. I know that sounds weird and it's not meant to sound mean, but I just don't. But the many people, you mentioned some of the people earlier, who I've covered and who I've got to know. And I think that I've come around to where I have such gratitude for everything, not quote unquote, just still being alive. I have a lot of gratitude with the people I've met who've helped to change my life or shape my life. Life's tough. Life's tough. Our profession's tough. I know that we cover games and sports and everything else. Our profession's pretty tough, for many reasons. And some people make it tougher than others. Some people make it a little easier than others. And you hope it balances out along the way, right? So, but when I was covering the Yankees, I never thought about going to NFL Network until it was a possibility. And then it was, I guess I'll go to NFL Network. Okay. The travel with the Yankees was, a lot, even though it was pretty good travel, but it was still a lot of travel. I did want to get back to football. And my point is I've gotten so many lucky breaks, if you want to call it that. I've gotten so many opportunities, which they certainly were. And I'm just grateful now for all of it. I really am. If this is somehow, let's say this, maybe after this, no one wants me to do a podcast even, Gordon.
No, that's not true. I'll have you on in another couple of weeks. Trust me, I'll be hitting you up again. No worries.
All right. Well, if you're going to have me on, I'll put that on the board over here. I don't think it's a bad thing to take stock of who you are and see it a little bit sunny side up. There's enough people in this world and in this business that'll knock you down when they can. You and I both know that. I'm not asking for names. You're not asking for names, but everyone knows that. And if you can make someone just a little bit happier with your content, with a smile, with going to a classroom. I spoke with your classroom.
Yeah, Montclair State all the time.
That kind of thing. I think you should do it. And you do it for free. You do it for free. The great majority of the time, you want to talk to a class of 35 kids who are going to try to have the professions that we've had. I think you do that for free because you're paying back what someone along the way paid you.
I know it's been a while since you've been in that Yankee clubhouse. Do you still follow the team? Or are you still interested in it? Or is it something that's it's like another lifetime ago?
It feels like a long time ago. It does feel like a long. Can I tell you a Derek Jeter story?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
He told me once that when he retired and I was no longer at Yes, that he'd give me this big interview. It never happened. But for a long time, like I kind of like tried to get back in there in a way. It's not going to happen. I mean, he doesn't need, to do a tell. That doesn't seem to be
not his style. No,
that kind of thing. But I think it must have been one of those moments, and I don't know that he had that many of them, but a moment where he was maybe fed up with a certain player or two. I don't know the answer to that. I don't for sure, so that's why I wouldn't say it. But the one thing about Jeter I really appreciate is when he got his 3,000th hit. I went up to the suite and interviewed his dad during the game. And his dad told me that the only reason he was doing the interview was because I asked. And from that family, from that player's family, that meant a lot to me. I'm like kind of I'm a touchy-feely person. Like I just got chills when I just said that, even though I've known it for years and years. I was a little girl, Gordon. Do you have time for one more story?
Absolutely.
I was a little girl who loved college basketball. I'll make the story as short as I can. And my dad was the principal of our high school, and the driver ed teacher and who did other classes was our neighbor. Well, he was also the boys basketball coach. Lo and behold, one summer, and this was in high school, Len Bias came to my high school because one of his coaches brought him to talk to the boys basketball camp at Dallastown Area High School. Well, Royce Gerber knew how much I loved Len Bias, so he let me in. And I remember shaking Len Bias's hand. I remember him saying that I couldn't be. Back then, girls and boys didn't do the same camps. I don't know how that goes now, but it was a boys basketball camp. But I was allowed to go. My dad was the principal of the school. The high school coach said it was fine. Everyone's on board because they all know me and know I'm a little, basketball head. And I met him, and as part of the remarks he made, which were not long, at the camp, he was there, but he didn't speak for a long time, as you would expect, because you wouldn't expect that. He said, "Don't do drugs or drink." And he was dead not long after that. That is probably my sports memory that haunts me the most. Not because I had some, identifying time with Len Bias who would remember me ever. That's not the point. But he was just the player that captivated me. And anyone of a certain age, and I know you have to be of a certain age, but to have watched him, to me, Gordon, he would have changed the game. I mean, Jordan comes in with him.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, the Celtics. The Celtics fans probably, I'm not a Celtics fan, but so I won't presume how they feel. And a lot of them wouldn't remember Len Bias, but for those who would, he would have changed the arc of the NBA, as a rookie, I think. He was just
electric. Yeah.
I'm grateful that while my memory's not fantastic, sometimes people will say something and I'll be like, shoot, why don't I remember that? But the things that are important, I feel
they're
like
in there.
Held there. And that was I know that this is going to sound silly to some people. That was a seminal time in my life. I'd never met someone like that who I watched on TV all the time and loved basketball. I was a little basketball head. I loved it. And it's that stuff that I still think about that puts a smile on my face, just like this podcast is putting on my face, because I'm happy to share. I'm really happy to share.
All right, Kim, we only have a couple of minutes left until we have you on the next time, 3 weeks from now. Anything in sports going on right now? I was talking earlier about the Aaron Rodgers situation with the Steelers. Is there anything in sports that's gotten under your skin?
Well, the Steelers, that happens to be my boyfriend's favorite team, so I get to hear him lament about it a lot. It strikes me as a not Steeler-ish way to go. And
Very
I know
much.
that like with Ben, they never, there was always drama with Ben. Ben was a hell of a quarterback, obviously, too. But, and he was theirs. But it just strikes me as a team that is really put itself almost into a corner, and like there are only 3 bouts left, and who's going to win this? But even if you win it, are you too bloodied to take on a regular season type of thing? If I can go boxing just for a little bit.
Yeah.
It has a weird Steeler feel to me. Like if you told me another team, and I don't know which one I would, choose necessarily. The Jets have a new regime. It's not fair to get on them yet. That kind of thing. The Giants haven't covered themselves in glory, but we've discussed their missteps, to some degree here, as we should. But I just don't understand like what's going on with him. It's not our business about his personal business. What I'm more interested in is that the Steelers are allowing any player to just kind of hamstring them for at least a time period, which I obviously they're getting into the workouts now, but it's not nearly the regular season yet. I understand that, but it just seems like the wrong move for a team that has usually made generally right moves in the Steelers.
And the strange thing to me is this has been their plan A. It's not like, somebody got hurt and we're scrambling last minute. We didn't know this before the draft. This was like, it seems like their plan A going into the offseason. It's very odd.
It is very odd. It's not, Mike Tomlin, always impressive in the press conferences I see. I mean, I don't watch every Mike Tomlin press conference, but I think we've all seen a lot of them over the years where we can assess, that he certainly is someone in charge who, lays down the law to some degree. I mean, he's coaching adults, obviously, but lays down the law and the expectations. And yet this is something where they've been adrift for months. I don't understand how that happens to a franchise that has been a shining star at certain times, really important times in the NFL, in the NFL history. I mean, some of their teams are, I don't need to tell this audience, they're going to be the Steelers, whether you like them or not, whether you root for them or not, are part of a big chapter on great teams in NFL history. And they're allowing Aaron Rodgers to lead them by the tail.
Well, Kim, I could talk to you for hours. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm sure you've got things to do about your day. So we will talk again soon, I'm sure. And all the best to you. As you know, I've professed my admiration for you many times, and I'll do it every single time that we run into each other.
If I rambled too much and callers tell you that, just tell them I am self-aware, but I also do love a story. And sometimes a story can't be told in 10 seconds. It's got to be a minute, and I get it. I get it. But thank you, Gordon. This was great. I'll do the podcast anytime.
The lovely and talented Kim Jones. All right, let's talk about the Knicks. As you probably know by now, Knicks stave off elimination last night, beating the Pacers in Game 5 at the Garden, 111-94. And look, I am not a big believer in the first half of NBA game. I feel like the first half is almost like a glorified practice because of the three-pointers, all these comebacks now. The first half is more meaningless than ever. Last night was different. You could tell that was an exception to the rule. From jump, you could tell the Knicks had a different energy, a different urgency, and they were playing with desperation. And you watch even just the first few minutes of the game, and you're thinking, where has this version of the Knicks been? Why haven't they had this same level of desperation earlier in this series? And then, of course, there's Jalen Brunson. After 48 hours of hearing some of the dumbest things imaginable about how he's this giant liability on defense and you can't win with him as your best player, he might not be that guy. How did he look last night? He came out from jump and dominated, had 14 points in the first quarter. He had 16 points in a stretch in the third where the Knicks pushed the lead up to, I think it was 22 at one point. He controlled the tempo. He attacked. He hit big shots, and he was postseason Brunson once again. Now, the Knicks were great. They came out with that different energy, a different intensity. But, I mean, you have to be fair. The Pacers were awful. They turned it over 20 times. They never seemed like they could really get anything going. They seemed kind of overwhelmed by the moment. Maybe that's part of they're up 3-1 and they know they're going home for game 6. And maybe they kind of let the foot off the gas a little bit. So the Knicks were awesome, but let's not pretend that Indiana didn't help them out. Oh, and about Tyrese Halliburton as well. It's funny how quiet things will get now. After a full day and a half of hearing about how he's a top 10 player, a top 5 player, he's this, he's that. He was a complete non-factor last night. 8 points and took just 7 shots and seemed like he had no interest in shooting. It felt like the moment was too big for him last night. Now, he's a fantastic player, but it seems like people got so carried away after game 4, which was incredible. But it was just one game. Now, I don't know that necessarily the Knicks figured anything out per se. I know Tibbs did extend the bench again. DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet both played some minutes. Both had an impact on defense, especially Shamet, who had that one series where he played, I think it was on Nimhart, where he forced a desperation shot and Knicks came down and Cat scored on the other end and got the foul. So Knicks fans wanted to see the bench. They wanted to see some of the reserves coming in for defense, and it has worked out perfectly. But again, I don't know that the Knicks necessarily figured anything out, and now this carries over to game 6 because I don't think anything carries over in these series. Every game is a different thing, and I could really see this series going anyway now. Like, I could see the Knicks going to Indiana and bringing the same kind of effort that they brought in game 5 and winning in Indiana and forcing a game 7, but I could still see the Knicks coming back to the Garden after 2 straight wins and losing a game 7. This series has been close throughout, so it would not shock me if we get a game 7. It would not shock me if the Knicks got blown out in game 6 in Indiana. So if you're a fan, you want game 5 to be that spark. You want to see that energy come out on Saturday with that heart and that desperation, and for it to carry over. Now, maybe it's just a one-game thing, but it feels like game 5 is a reminder that when they are desperate and they play like their season's on the line, that's the kind of performance that you could get. That might have been their best overall performance of the entire playoffs. So in sports, there's no better 2 words than game 7. You just have to hope that a game 6 win will force a game 7 back at the Garden. And then at that point, you take your chances. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Please, if you've not already done so, please hit that subscribe button, like the episode, rate the episode, whatever buttons you can press, please press them. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.